I'd like to welcome you to another Enrichment with the Gifted Guy. The idea we're going to be talking about today is do your visuals communicate what you intend them to? So you can see in this picture, we have someone giving a presentation and they're just pointing at words, the very words that they're speaking. Would it be more effective if instead of talking about the apple in text, if they actually showed a picture of an apple? And this is also about finding meaningful visuals, visuals that are going to communicate what you want them to. So they always say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so the question becomes, are your visuals saying the words that you want them to? So if you're using a visual for a very specific purpose, you're trying to communicate something, is it indeed doing that? The reason why visuals are so important is because most people are visual learners. Matter of fact, our brains process visuals 60,000 times faster than text. So if you put text on the screen, it's going to take a while for people to process that, but they can immediately start processing visuals at a deeper level. But being pretty is not enough. You have to consider the 5 C's when it comes to learning visuals. And these are clear. So is the visual making the point that you want it to? Is it clear to the audience why this picture is there and what is it trying to do? Concise. So does it explain a long, complicated idea in a short amount of time? That's why we use visuals to illustrate something that may be complicated and to show us what that would look like. The third C is connected. Do they help the learners make connections? So if you're trying to teach something, is this visual then making that connection clear? Compelling. When people look at things, they want to find things that are eye-catching, that are visually pleasing to them. Does it make them think? I mean, visuals that make people think are wonderful. It's getting more than 1,000 words. And then lastly, the fifth C is complete. And so the ultimate question you have to ask is, do you need a visual? And the answer is sometimes you don't. But there are other times where a visual can really bring something to life, can really show what we want to show. We often say that when you're writing that you should show, not tell. A lot of times when we're giving a presentation and we're talking at people, we're telling them. But you can use these visuals to help show what you're trying to tell them. So here's a perfect example of how visuals can be a distraction. If you see this animation, it's spinning round and round. I can't catch what it's saying until it comes to a stop. And so I have to wait for it to come to a stop in order to make my point. Here's my point from this particular visual. So you see the spectrum of really good visuals versus really bad visuals. So really bad visuals tend to be distractions, kind of like the animation that I just showed you. Or it could be that they are a lot of style, but not much substance. On the good side, we want to have images that are really interesting and relevant to what you're talking about. So the visual shouldn't just be there for the sake of being there. It should demonstrate something. And if you don't have anything you need to demonstrate, then don't use a visual for that particular part. And then we want to share these like ideas that are unique and relevant to people and makes them think. Is kind of what we're shooting for the most meaningful types of visuals. So we have to ask questions of our visuals, because when we put a visual on a slide deck or use it in a presentation or whatever, we have to ask ourselves, is it communicating what we want it to? So one thing you might want to be trying to communicate is a message. And so let's say that your message is look both ways before crossing the street. You could show this visual. But what is the problem with this visual? Well, the kid is already crossing the street. He may be looking one way, but did he look both ways? If we're trying to teach this lesson of looking both ways before crossing the street, he's already out into the street. We don't know what he's done before then. So this visual is not communicating that idea, that message. However, if I show this visual with these 3 people, we have the girl looking one way, the mom looking another way, they're holding hands, they're going over a crosswalk, they haven't stepped out into the street yet. This is definitely conveying the message of look both ways before you cross the street. An obvious question we need to ask is the image large enough? Sometimes we include an image and people are like searching for it, like, where's Waldo? They shouldn't be searching for your visual, especially if it's the main idea of what you're trying to make. So if I want to show something like this tiny little stop sign that's like barely a blip in the middle of this picture, it's not really conveying the idea of stopping with any urgency. It kind of just seems to be in the background almost. And yet, if you use this stands out. People can see this. It allows them to, this is why they make stop signs large. And some of them are really busy as intersections. They even have lights around them to draw more attention to them because this is an important visual. We need to see the sign in order to stop so we don't get hit by a car. Another question we want to ask is, does it provide the detail that we want it to? So let's say that I am giving a presentation on how to hit a forehand in tennis. I could show a visual like this, which shows a professional player hitting a forehand, but it doesn't show how to hit that forehand. It just shows the what of hitting the forehand. I need more detail if I'm truly going to teach my audience how to hit a forehand. So a better visual to use would be this one, which breaks it down into steps. So I could give the presentation of, you start with your shoulder square to the court, you turn to the side, depending on where the ball comes, you get your racket back, you hit the ball in front of you, you follow through, and that's how you hit a forehand. And so this visual shows me much better and in much more detail how I would accomplish hitting this forehand. We also want things to be colorful or appealing. So we want to show visuals that are eye-catching, that draw the attention of your audience, if that's what you intend to do. So we could show, if we're trying to give this message of reading is fun, we could certainly put something like this as a visual. It certainly communicates clearly the idea that reading is fun. But this visual right here is a little more aesthetically pleasing. It's kind of nicer colors. It's got a colorful character, the cat in the hat. And so this would probably catch the attention of the audience a bit more, and the message would be clearer than if you just had the message by itself. Another question is, does it inform you? In other words, when you look at a visual should be communicating just as the words should be communicating. So if I have this visual and I'm trying to make the point that we should stop global warming, this doesn't really inform people of how they can do that. It just tells them, I'm telling them, stop. But if I say to them instead, look, if you want to stop global warming, here are some things that you can do. You can use less hot water. You can use the off switch. You can change a light bulb, plant a tree, recycle. So this gives me concrete things that people in the audience can do in order to accomplish what I'm wanting them to do. Visuals need to be simple, and there's kind of a fine line here. You want to have it simple, but not so simple. So let's say I'm trying to explain to a class how a bill becomes a law, and I throw this visual up there. It's a very, very busy visual. You could probably spend 10, 15 minutes looking at this visual and trying to decipher and discern every piece of information that's on this. It's a big, so if I'm explaining using this visual, no one can really focus in or hone on anything very specific. So I need a simpler visual. So a simpler visual would look like this, where instead of having all the different colors, all the text, all the whatever, it's broken it down to a clear flow. And I can walk through this flow of how a bill becomes a law. And so you can see this, that the one is more simple. And because it's more simple, I'm able to more clearly communicate what I want to communicate. Remember, we want to provide detail, but we don't want to confuse the audience. We don't want to overwhelm them. Another question about visuals is, do they make you think? Are they thought-provoking? Visuals act as a hook. So if you show a visual on the screen and it gets people thinking, then you have that's one way that you can hook them into what you're saying. So if I'm giving a presentation on why smoking is bad, and I use the following visual: don't smoke. very clearly, it makes my point, but I've not made a compelling reason why. Why shouldn't you smoke? What is so bad about smoking other than me just telling you? If I were to show this picture instead and say, look, the picture on the right hand side is smoker's lung, the black lung. The one on the other side is a non smoker's. So the question to ask is, what set of lungs would you want to have in your body? So I can take this visual and communicate the exact same message, but I can also communicate the why, why you should not smoke. It should be a professional visual. So there are tons of visuals. I mean, when you're using a visual, we can pull anything as long as we're not selling it or whatever. We can, pull a visual and use it in our presentation to give information to people. And so you want these visuals to be professional. So if I'm a science teacher and I'm trying to teach about DNA and I show them this doesn't really look that professional. It looks like something that was drawn by a middle school student. And so not that there's anything wrong with a middle school student, but this is just not as professional. Let's say something like this, where it has the exact same thing. It has this DNA, but it breaks it down. It gives us a legend. It lets us see so much more detail, so much more information. It looks so much more professional. So we want to make sure that, because when you're giving a formal presentation, you want to get off the appearance of professional, no matter how old you are. You want to appear as though a professional. Does it appeal to the emotions? Sometimes visuals can be manipulative, and sometimes that's what you want them to be. You want to try to convince someone of something by using a visual. So if I'm trying to convince people that there are children that are starving in Africa and we need to help those children, I could certainly show them statistics like you see here, that 52 million children are acutely malnourished and 1 million children die from severe malnutrition. So you can clearly see this is a problem, but it's just numbers. And sure, it's a very big number, but there's no face to this. And so if we want to appeal to people's emotions, we might show a picture like this of a child who was starving in Africa. You look at this picture and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe how skinny that child is. What can I do to help? And so it is a bit manipulative, but it gets its point across of trying to tap into the emotions of people in your audience to try to get them to take action on something. Another question is, does it focus your message? In other words, so if you have a message, a thesis to your message, and you really want to convey this. So I could show this picture of this puppy and people will be, oh, he's so cute. But it doesn't really focus. It's just about a cute puppy. But if I show these cute puppies, and you can see they have signs that say adopt me, choose me, take. So the message becomes more clear here. I'm not just talking about puppies. I'm talking about adopting a puppy. And so the message becomes so much more clear with this second visual. When it comes to visuals, you need to employ what's called the Goldilocks principle. Now, you might be asking yourself, what the heck is the Goldilocks principle? And I can show you this visual, but does it give you any more information about what the Goldilocks principle is? I mean, it meets some of the criteria of what we talked about here today. It's visually appealing, it's colorful, it looks professional, it has the message that I'm trying to get across very clearly, but it doesn't tell us anything. It has no substance. And so we have to kind of have this balance between style and substance. So if I'm explaining the Goldilocks principle with this visual, you can probably see what the Goldilocks principle is a lot easier with this visual, which is that we have to have visuals that aren't too overstimulating or too overcomplicated or going to cause people to focus not on your words at all, but only on the visual, or not enough, where the visual just doesn't communicate what you want it to. The visual kind of is there, but doesn't serve a clear purpose. We need to have the just right. Your visuals need to communicate what you want to communicate and help you to communicate what you're trying to explain. So the ultimate question to ask is then, should I use visuals or not? And here are some reasons why you should use visuals. And I'll let you look over those, but some of the important ones here are that Visuals are help with people with permanence with their thinking. So when you see a visual, it's going to be more burned into your brain than if you heard something. And so by doing both of them, the verbal and the visual, that is going to double your chances of someone remembering what you were talking about. Probably the most important one, though, is that visuals help people to see what you mean. They show you what you're trying to show the audience. And so the ultimate question to ask yourself is, can I explain this without visuals and it be as effective? So I'll ask that question of this very presentation. I've showed you lots of visuals as examples of what not to do and what to do. Did you find these visuals helpful? Did you find that these visuals helped you to gain a better understanding of them? Could you imagine if the visuals were not there? Would the message be as clear? Would you have a good understanding of the message I was trying to communicate? So that's what you ultimately have to ask yourself is, visuals or no visuals, whichever one allows me to communicate most effectively with people, then that's what I need to do.